The year is 1965, the month is March, and the day is the 22nd. You just got home from the record store with an exciting purchase, a new album from folk legend Bob Dylan. A few years ago, he rocketed into stardom through his poetic songwriting, tender guitar playing, and world-weary voice and image. He became a vocal political performer with eternal anthems like A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, The Times They Are A-Changin', and many more. And today, you get to hear the next installment in his great catalog. You look at the album cover, see Dylan staring right at you, and read the title, Bringing It All Back Home. You excitedly take the vinyl out of the sleeve and set the needle down. In the moment of silence between the needle drop and album beginning, your mind is racing thinking of the acoustic folk epic that awaits you. And then it begins. Bringing It All Back Home is one of the most important albums of the 1960s, as well as the first large-scale turning point in the career of Bob Dylan that was being formulated since the previous album, Another Side of Bob Dylan. Bringing It All Back Home's tracks were recorded primarily on 2 days, January 14th and 15th, 1965. The only exception is the introduction on Bob Dylan's 115th Dream, which was recorded on the 13th. When the album released, it reached number 6 on the Billboard Pop Albums chart, the first time he was able to crack the top 10. The album was a musical evolution of his prior sound, combining blues, folk, and rock and roll to create the genre of folk rock. The album also saw a lyrical evolution through its surreal and often apocalyptic songwriting. The album represented a work that was both before and of its time. The poetic lyrics often take inspiration and have dialogue with centuries-old literature, but also with modern society. The novel musical style represented a crossroads between centuries-old traditions of blues and folk music and the emerging sound of rock and roll. While the album was received well by many critics and fans, there were many that were appalled at the change in direction, and with the release of this album, a split had been created in the Bob Dylan fanbase. Decades later, Bringing It All Back Home is now seen as one of the most integral popular music releases of the 1960s, as well as one of the most revered albums of one of the most revered musical artists. To dive further into this album, let's look at each of the songs chronologically. This is... The album begins with an ageless classic, Subterranean Homesick Blues. The song was released as the first single from the album on March 8, 1965. It was the first Dylan single to chart on the Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 39. The song also had a promotional video, which was rare for the time. It was first seen in 1967 as part of the film Don't Look Back. This was a rare early example of a music video. The video featured Dylan holding up cue cards that contained the lyrics to the song, but there are intentional misspellings and gags on them. The video is set in an alley, and in the background, Allen Ginsberg and Bob Newhart are seen having a discussion. Both the song and the accompanying video have become icons of popular music, and have been parodied for decades. Musically, the song marked a huge change to Dylan's sound, keeping the folk sound but leaning heavily into rock and roll and blues. And while this, to fans at the time, was a massive surprise, with the benefit of hindsight, we see that this was somewhat inevitable, as Dylan was heavily inspired by artists of many genres like Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams, Robert Johnson, and many others. He became popular through the folk revival movement of the early 1960s, but he had always wanted to find a more unique and powerful sound. From his very first single, this was the case. He released Mixed Up Confusion in 1962, which resembles Subterranean Homesick Blues, but it was released to almost no attention. The next single, Blowin' in the Wind, would become his first classic single. So for the first time on a studio album, Dylan goes electric. With a rollicking momentum and spitfire lyrical delivery, the song begins Bringing It All Back Home with a fierce and energetic note. The harmonica solos are delivered between verses in a way that resembles a guitar solo. There's a certain looseness to the instrumentation that contributes to the hectic atmosphere of the song. Dylan has said that the song's music was inspired by Chuck Berry's song Too Much Monkey Business, both musically and lyrically, and this can be confirmed when listening to both. The musical style and identity are similar, and the line delivery is similarly fast-paced. But now, let's examine the lines being delivered. The song's title was inspired by Jack Kerouac's book The Subterraneans, where a group of characters live on the fringes of society and feel isolated from the rest of the world, almost like they're underground. With the title of the song being Subterranean Homesick Blues, it could be read as the narrator recounting his view of the surface world before returning to a subterranean society. The lyrical style of the song transforms the explicit protest writings of prior albums into a surreal and sophisticated poetry ecosystem, where images and literary influences take control. The writing style of the song and the entire album was influenced by the Beat Generation, with allusions and stylistic similarities to authors like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. These writers employed techniques such as spontaneous prose and stream-of-consciousness writing. Both are seen on this song and the rest of the album. Because of this, the lyrics are political and social, yet personal and abstract. There are references to drug use in lines like, "Keep a clean nose, watch the plane close," "Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine," and "They must bust in early May, orders from the DA." There are also calls to be skeptical of those in power with lines like, "The phone's tapped anyway," "Better stay away from those who carry around a fire hose," and "Don't follow leaders and watch your parking meters." There were also lines that urged the listener to think freely and be skeptical of the institutions that have tried to run you through the machine and trap you in the human rat race. This can be seen in various lines, but especially in my favorite line of the song, "20 years of schooling and they put you on the day shift." Looking at the writing of the song, the protest material was far from gone, but it was delivered in a more imagery-laden and sophisticated manner. All of the lines of the song come together to weave a tapestry of the state of the world in 1965, a beatnik roller coaster ride through an uneasy society. The Vietnam War was raging, the Cold War was tense, and the civil rights movement was being met with horrific violence. I believe this song's meaning can be most intelligently summarized in this quote from music critic Tim Riley. It's less of an indictment of the system than a coil of imagery that spells out how the system hangs itself with the rope it's so proud of. The wild and societal atmosphere of the opener is replaced with the tranquil tones of "She Belongs to Me." The song musically does not walk, but rather elegantly saunters with a steady rhythm, calming electric guitar, gentle acoustic strumming, and a subdued vocal. The song's title is entirely ironic, as the lyrics explain exactly the opposite of this sentiment. The song's narrator muses about an exceptional and independent woman. Many have offered guesses as to the identity of the woman in the song, with many believing it to be his former girlfriend, Susie Rotolo, Joan Baez, or even German singer Nico, as stated by John Cale of the Velvet Underground. One line in the song, "She wears an Egyptian ring," could refer specifically to Baez, as Dylan had given this as a gift. The verses of the song reflect an absurd depiction of the woman, with lines like, "She's nobody's child, the law can't touch her at all," and "Bow down to her on Sunday." There are lines in the song that show the woman's dominance over men, like, "You will start out standing, proud to steal her anything she sees, but you will wind up peeking through her keyhole down upon your knees." There are also lines that attribute a divine nature to the woman, like, "She can take the dark out of the nighttime and paint the daytime black." The combination of all of the lyrics shows someone who is all-knowing, venerable, and untouchable. Some believe this lyrical identity suggests that the song is about the narrator's obsession with a woman, while others believe it to be an extremely devotional love song. There is also the interpretation that it is about God. The lyrics about manipulating the day and night, being a creator, and bowing down on Sunday certainly suggest this. The question is, if it is meant to be a literal interpretation or an illusion. In my view, these interpretations do not oppose each other, but rather act as different readings of the same idea. Maggie's Farm resurrects the energy of the opener and continues the biting attitude. This song was the first electric number Dylan played live. He debuted on July 25, 1965 at the Newport Folk Festival. Once the song ended, he was greeted with a conflicting mix of boos and applause. Bob Dylan had musically displayed that he was done being categorized and classified. The music has a jaunty and energetic rhythm and is complemented by the attitude of the vocal delivery and harmonica bursts. The song's format follows a blues structure, with each verse beginning with the same line repeated twice. Musically, the song is inspired by a folk song from 1929 called Penny's Farm. Dylan had already used parts of it in a previous song, Hard Times in New York Town. For instance, he repeats the opening lines, "Come you ladies and you gentlemen and listen to my song. I'll sing it to you right, though you might think it's wrong." The song's lyrics tell of hard times in the country because of a greedy landlord, and Maggie's Farm spins an elaborate diorama of Maggie's family and their ridiculous treatment of the narrator. It expands upon the meaning of the song that it was inspired from and creates something completely new out of it. In the beginning of each verse, the narrator exclaims that he's not going to work on Maggie's farm, or for the other members of her family, and the next three lines explain why. The song's lyrics continue the countercultural identity of Subterranean and Homesick Blues. While that song was a diagnosis of the situation, Maggie's Farm acts as a call to rebel, a call to think freely and reject the institutions that have created the difficult conditions of the modern era. There are numerous interpretations of the lyrics that have been explained over the years. One interpretation reads the song as literal, with the idea that the narrator is a plantation worker who wants to be free. Another interpretation sees the narrator as Dylan himself wanting to be free from the type of music that he has been pigeonholed into by Columbia Records and the music public. I believe both of these interpretations to be accurate, and again, can both be true. The centerpiece lyric of the song to me is the line, "Well, I try my best to be just like I am, but everybody wants you to be just like them. They say, sing while you slave, and I just get bored." I ain't gonna work Maggie's farm no more. This line represents the attitude of the whole album. Bob Dylan is done being the kind of person that everyone wants him to be, the kind of person that doesn't exist. Now we have another love song, this time a little more sweet. The title Love minus zero over no limit is a math expression. When looking at the expression, we can read a more in-depth meaning to the title. In the top of the fraction, we have love as a value and 0 is subtracted from it. There is nothing taken away from love. Then the denominator of the fraction is no limit, or infinity. When putting these pieces together, the title describes love as something that is all-encompassing and lacks nothing. Another interpretation of the title is that it is gambling terminology, and the orientation of the words would suggest that love is always a risk. The song carries another lovely instrumental performance. A steady rhythm, gentle guitars, and a soft vocal give the song a romantic atmosphere. The lyrics of the song are about the narrator's love. The language of the song is highly poetic, with plenty of imagery. There are also plenty of juxtaposed ideas in the song that seem to be opposite. This can be seen in lines like, "My love, she speaks like silence," and "Yeah, she's true, like ice, like fire." However, the narrator's tone shifts towards the end of the song. His resentment is described in these lines, "Bankers' nieces seek perfection, expecting all the gifts that wise men bring." The next two lines describe a tempestuous situation. "The wind howls like a hammer, the night blows cold and rainy." And the final two lines show how the situation has changed. "My love, she's like some raven at my window with a broken wing." This, at first glance, may seem like the narrator is about to do something kind by taking in the bird and caring for it. But the song's lyrics end here. The narrator does not let the bird in from the storm. In the context of the narrative, the narrator leaves his love in a hurt state and does not feel the need to help her. The song's poetry is so sophisticated to the level that it is compared to centuries-old literature like The Raven. The song has also been compared to William Blake's poem The Sick Rose. Both of these poems and the song describe love in a detached yet intense emotional way. Love minus zero over no limit follows the pattern of the previous love song on the album, She Belongs to Me. The narrator puts his love on an untouchable pedestal, to the point that it strips her of her humanity. The pace picks up with the next track, Outlaw Blues. The song is another energetic romp, but with a more prominent electric guitar lead. The guitar has a chunky metallic sound to it, which would be perfected 2 albums later. The music has a rock and roll blues attitude that perfectly suits the mood of the lyrics, which are about the narrator's life as an outlaw. The song's opening line was influenced by a well-known folk song called I'm a Stranger Here. The phrase 9 below 0 is a nod to Sonny Boy Williamson's song of the same name, and the use of the time 3 o'clock is a nod to B.B. King's 3 O'Clock Blues. These inclusions in the first verse show Dylan making direct nods to some of the artists that inspired his new musical direction. Another verse references the death of famous American outlaw Jesse James at the hand of the coward Robert Ford. Another verse features a quintessentially Dylan-esque passage, "Don't ask me nothing about nothing, I just might tell you the truth." In the final verse, the narrator mentions that he is a woman, but won't reveal her identity. The lines of the verse are similar to the first verse, where they are inspired by other songs. The opening line is most likely derived from Ray Charles' iconic I Got a Woman. The Woman in Jackson line is most likely derived from Sonny Boy Williamson's Bluebird Blues. The brown-skinned woman line is most likely derived from Robert Johnson's When You Got a Good Friend, and the line I Love Her Just the Same is most likely from Louis Jordan's Caledonia. Also, I believe it's worth noting that Caledonia was the first song in which the phrase rock and roll was used in writing in a review in Billboard magazine. Since Outlaw Blues pays homage to the history of American blues music, it makes sense to end off with the early beginning of rock and roll. The lyrical identity of the song pays homage to the idea of the great American outlaw. This wild outlaw identity became consistent in his writing and reached a peak a decade later on Desire. The outlaw was a type of figure that Dylan always admired and felt a connection with. The American outlaw is a cultural representation of the ultimate freedom, and this is what Dylan wanted for his music. He wanted the freedom to make the kind of music and say the kind of things that he wanted. Next we have On the Road Again. The song's title is thought to be derived from a book that Bob Dylan said changed his life, Jack Kerouac's On the Road. This novel was a defining landmark in the post-war counterculture movement, and its influence can be felt throughout the album. The song also has roots within blues songs such as the Memphis Jug Band's song of the same name. This is thought to be the origin for the song's name. This makes sense considering Dylan's knowledge of the band. He previously covered their song Stealin'. Musically, the song is a jaunty rock and roll number in 12-bar structure. The vocal delivery and harmonica bursts convey an attitude like on the previous song. The song's lyrics are about the narrator's frustrations with his partner's crazy household. Among the things he lists, her dad wears a Napoleon Bonaparte mask, her mom hides in the icebox, she has an ill-behaved pet monkey, a thieving uncle, fist fights in the kitchen, and many more. At the end of each verse, the narrator explains how his partner asks why he doesn't live there, and he responds differently. The first time he says, "Honey, do you have to ask?" The last line he says, "Honey, how come you don't move?" The song seems to be about anxiety in a relationship surrounding in-laws. The title is not mentioned in the song, but I believe it regards where the narrator will be after experiencing all this, on the road again. Bob Dylan's 115th Dream begins traditionally, just Dylan and his guitar, but it is suddenly broken up from the other side of the glass. Producer Tom Wilson bursts into laughter after Dylan forgets to cue the band, which was normal in the early electric sessions since he was used to playing alone. Then the song begins again, and a frantic tapestry of America begins to unravel. The beginning blooper was a rare example of an outtake on a studio album at the time, but it sets up the listener for what they're about to hear. It makes sense that a more comedically oriented song is preceded by a burst of laughter. The title of the song is an allusion to a song on the Free Will and Bob Dylan album, Bob Dylan's Dream. While this first dream was a tender yearn for simpler times, the 115th Dream is a large-scale, silly epic. Musically, the song calls back to the song Motorcycle Nightmare from Dylan's previous album, Another Side of Bob Dylan. This could be seen in the melody and chord structure, which are almost identical to each other. I believe the similarity contributes to a thematic connection between the two songs. Motorcycle Nightmare also has a comedic storyline that weaves in social and political commentary, but this song expands it to where the entirety of Motorcycle Nightmare's events could be one verse of this 11-verse behemoth. The lyrics are sung by a narrator who sails to America on the Mayflower. Once the narrator spots land, he tells the crew to forget the whale, referencing Moby Dick. Then the crew sings Haul on the Bowline, an old sea shanty. Once they hit land, the captain, named Captain Arab, a comedic reference to Moby Dick's Captain Ahab, starts writing up deeds to buy the land, but a policeman arrests the crew and jails them for carrying harpoons. Just at this point, the story already feels like a dream, as it is made of stories and songs and historical events that are all compiled into one frantic story. The story also seems to have dream logic, where certain things will happen without explanation. This is seen in the first line of the third verse when the narrator escapes prison. "Ah me, I busted out, don't even ask me how." He then goes to a restaurant, orders a crepe Suzette, and the kitchen explodes. He leaves without his hat. He then goes to a bank to get bail for the crew, but they ask for collateral and he pulls down his pants. He's kicked out, robbed, and on the street again. After some more misadventures, the narrator decides to flip a coin as to whether he should bail the crew out or leave. Heads is the ship, and tails is the jail. He flips it and gets tails, but it rhymes with sails, so he goes back to the ship. When he leaves, he sees 3 ships sailing towards the mainland. He asks for the captain's name, who replies with Columbus, and the narrator just says, "Good luck." While there is a lot more to the story, these are some of the main plot points. The story is jumbled, confusing, and nonsensical, but it is a perfect representation of a story in a dream. We often have dreams that have convoluted stories that are combinations of various people, places, and ideas in our lives. This song turns that idea into a hilarious romp that ends side 1 with a true Dylan classic. Side 2 opens with one of Dylan's most iconic numbers, Mr. Tambourine Man. The song was originally written and composed in early 1964, around the same time as Chimes of Freedom. Both were considered for his next album at the time, Another Side of Bob Dylan, but while Chimes of Freedom was added to the track listing, Mr. Tambourine Man was held until the next album. The song musically is simple in execution. The album version features Dylan on vocals, harmonica, and acoustic guitar, along with Bruce Langhorne on electric guitar. The musical elements are few in number but effective in practice. The musical layers blend together to create a small-scale yet emotionally powerful and intimate soundscape. Having Bruce Langhorne be involved in the recording was most likely derived from the fact that he is the inspiration for the Tambourine Man. In a previous session, he had brought a 4-inch deep Turkish frame drum to the studio. With this context, it's almost like Dylan in the song is performing for his muse, who harmonizes with him and combines to deliver a performance that is as magical as it is iconic. The lyrics were far more surreal and imagery-laden than his previous poetry. This was derived from works that had influenced his evolving style of songwriting. Dylan cited Federico Fellini's film La Strada as an influence on the song's lyrics. The song's lyrics begin with the chorus. The narrator calls on the Tambourine Man to play a song for him, and that in the jingle jangle morning he'll follow him. The chorus is difficult to discern, but I believe this to complement the hazy, dreamlike atmosphere of the song and its poetry. The first verse continues this with images of empires returning to sand and ancient empty streets. In the second verse, the narrator accepts a trip aboard a magic swirling ship, where his senses have been stripped, his hands can't feel to grip, and his toes are too numb to step. The narrator ends the verse by promising to go under a dancing spell. This second verse seems to reflect the idea that the narrator is accepting going through a transformative adventure, and the details about his senses and movements being dull could allude to several things, including a sleeping dreamlike state, a drug-induced state, or an out-of-body state. In the third verse, the narrator explains to the audience that the Tambourine Man is an impotent character, and that he's just a shadow you're seeing that he's chasing. The final verse delivers the most incredible imagery of the song. It gives the audience images of smoke rings of the mine, foggy ruins of time, frozen leaves, haunted and frightened trees, a windy beach, a diamond sky, circus sands, and more. The lyrics also describe these images being far from the twisted reach of crazy sorrow, almost like the place described in the song is either metaphysical or entirely within the mind. In the final line of the last verse, the narrator says, "Let me forget about today until tomorrow." It seems the narrator views the whole idea as an escapist fantasy, and as the prior line remarked, the thing that the narrator is escaping from is a twisted reach of crazy sorrow. The mysterious poetry of the song has led to many different interpretations over the years, everything from the narrator being in a drugged-out fantasy to the narrator being led into the afterlife. As I've said before, I believe these interpretations to be complementary and conscious of the emotional experience portrayed by the combination of the lyrics and music. It is clear why Mr. Tambourine Man has become a classic song. Its heights of mysterious, confounding, yet transcendent beauty have rarely been matched. Another epic follows, with Gates of Eden. The song was written in the summer of 1964 and appeared in the original manuscripts for Another Side of Bob Dylan. Like Mr. Tambourine Man, it was held for the next album. The song is performed simply, with just Dylan, the acoustic guitar, and harmonica. In this case, they exist to serve the poetry entirely. The poetic style of this song is similar to Mr. Tambourine Man in the way that it is primarily image-based and interpretive. The difference, in my view, is that this song reflects a stream of consciousness poem more than Mr. Tambourine Man, where the words are written to represent a stream of thoughts drifting through the mind. Therefore, the lyrics are less literal and more representative, relying on fascinating imagery and aesthetics. This is perfectly represented in the first verse. Of war and peace the truth just twists, its curfew goal it glides. Upon four-legged forest clouds the cowboy angel rides, with his candle lit into the sun, though its glow is waxed and black, all except when 'neath the trees of Eden. The vivid and bizarre language of the song was inspired by the beat poets of the era. This can be confirmed by one of the most influential members of the beat movement, Allen Ginsberg. In an interview, he explained how Dylan was continuing the legacy. In the interview, he was asked, "Do you think that your poetry helped to make the work of songwriters like Dylan possible?" He responded with, "Among others, I think that between Kerouac and myself and Burroughs, there was quite an impact. Dylan told me that I know Kerouac was a major inspiration for him as a poet. I think it's those chains of flashing images, the motorcycled Black Madonna two-wheeled gypsy queen and her silver-studded phantom love come out of Kerouac's rhetoric." He was then asked, "Do you hear the link with your own work and with Kerouac's and Dylan's songs?" He responded with, "Well, beat writings has been in the air for quite a while, from the later 50s on, but I wouldn't claim credit particularly. That long verse line with many nouns and adjectives and interesting combinations of words like fried shoes or hydrogen jukebox, that was a genre drawn from Whitman, from surrealism, from European poetry of the 20th century, Dadaist poets, from the Russian poets, from Lorca. When I heard Dylan's records, I heard that instantly, and I was knocked out. I thought, well, at least we're not a dead end." From the words of Ginsberg, it seems to be the case that Gates of Eden was an example of how Bob Dylan was continuing the global cultural tradition of poetry. There are many works that have been cited as influence for the poetry of this song, including William Blake's book The Gates of Paradise, the works of Kerouac, and the Book of Revelation. I believe these are all fused together to create the style of poetry presented in Gates of Eden. The title references the biblical Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were banished for eating the apple off of the Tree of Knowledge. Adding a gate to the garden suggests that it is locked up and impassable. Perhaps the writings of Gates of Eden takes place after Adam and Eve were banished and the fall of man began. The fourth line is necessary to understanding the poetry of the song. It describes that Aladdin and his lamp as well as the utopian hermit monks sit side saddle on the golden calf. The next two lines explain that there are no laughs when they promise paradise, but there are laughs from inside the gates of Eden. To put it another way, those who bow down to false gods are barred from entering the gates of Eden. Further lyrics in the song show an array of individuals seeking to enter the gates of Eden, such as the motorcycle Black Madonna two-wheeled gypsy queen, a grey flannel dwarf, paupers, the prince, the princess, and more. The penultimate verse of the song presents an interesting connection to another source. The third and fourth lines read as, "Leaving men wholly, totally free to do anything they wish to do but die, and there are no trials inside the gates of Eden." This is most likely derived from the Book of Revelation, where Revelation 9 explains what will happen to sinners when God returns. A swarm of locusts with the power of scorpions will torture sinners, but the sinners will not be allowed to die. But the torture and lack of death will occur for 5 months. The final two lines summarize the morality of the song. "At times I think there are no words but these to tell what's true, and there are no truths outside the gates of Eden. The truth is with God, and the truth lies within paradise, inside the gates of Eden." From one epic to another, we move on to the longest song on the album, It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding. This song was also written in the summer of 1964 and finished for inclusion on Bringing It All Back Home. Over the years since its release, this song has become one of Dylan's most admired and beloved for its intricate poetry and irresistibly catchy acoustic guitar riff. The performance is similarly intimate to the previous song, with only Dylan, his acoustic guitar, and harmonica. The lyrics are extremely intricate and require a deep analysis to even understand somewhat. We'll start with the title. With Dylan being a fan of Elvis Presley, it is likely that the title is derived from Elvis's first single, That's Alright, or as it's alternatively referred to, That's Alright Mama. Dylan takes the title and adds a parenthesized subtitle, I'm Only Bleeding. The title combines the sunshine of Elvis's song with the darkness of Dylan's, and while That's Alright's lyrics reflect a hope for a forbidden teenage romance, Dylan's lyrics reflect a world in which all hope is seemingly dead. If anything, this song's pessimism complements the ideals of the previous song, Gates of Eden. If anything, the world of It's Alright Ma is the world that is shut out from Eden. The opening verse of the song seems to fit as an ending, but this is just the beginning. We're immediately assaulted with rapid-fire dour imagery. Darkness at the break of noon shadows even the silver spoon, the handmade blade, the child's balloon, eclipses both the sun and moon. To understand you know too soon, there is no sense in trying. The second verse explains the things being said in this world. Pointed threats they bluff with scorn, suicide remarks are torn. From the fool's gold mouthpiece the hollow horn plays wasted words, proves to warn that he not busy being born is busy dying. The final line is often cited as one of Dylan's best, and I agree wholeheartedly. The third verse explains the actions of the audience. Temptation's page flies out the door, you follow, find yourself at war, watch waterfalls of pity roar, you feel to moan but unlike before you discover that you'd just be one more person crying. After these three verses, we're thrust into the chorus with a prettier sound, almost like the chorus is a quick respite between the chaos of the verses. In the chorus, the narrator reassures his mother. This is the first inclination that hope in the world is not dead. There are three more verses that display more of what this world has created. We hear a diverging split between those who hate versus those who hate hatred, how not much is sacred, and how even the President of the United States sometimes must have to stand naked. But then we're thrust into another chorus, but this time the narrator reassures his mother and tells her that he can make it. The impetus of hope hinted at in the first chorus has evolved into real hope. The next three verses further flesh out this world into a twisted and anarchic cesspool. But things turn in the third chorus, where the narrator says he has nothing to live up to. As the song goes on, we get even more incredible pieces of writing such as the line, money doesn't talk, it swears. And at the end, we see the spark of hope be snuffed out. The line reads as follows, and if my thought dreams could be seen, they'd probably put my head in a guillotine. But it's alright ma, it's life and life only. In this chorus, the narrator seems to give up. He acknowledges that those in power would be threatened by his free thought and execute him. And instead of believing that things could be different or that he'll make it, he just says that it's life and life only. He seemingly accepts that all the terrible things in the world are inherent and cannot be changed. And in a world where there is no hope, nothing can be expected to change for the better. Now we arrive at the final song on the album, fittingly titled, It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. The music is sparsely performed, with Dylan, his acoustic guitar and harmonica, along with bass accompaniment played by Bill Lee. The combination of the musical elements and emotional lyrics creates a hard-hitting and poignant ending. The lyrics display a complex emotional turning point, where emotions of the past, the present, and future collide. The lyrics read as a farewell. The song is structured in 4 verses, each in the same format. The first 2 lines are a harsh command, then the next 2 lines are a more somber and subdued observation, then the 5th line is a harsh warning, and the final line is a somber telling of the title of the song. To prove this, let's examine the first verse. It starts with a harsh command, you must leave now, take what you need you think will last. But whatever you wish to keep, you better grab it fast. Then there's the somber and subdued observation. Yonder stands your orphan with his gun, crying like a fire in the sun. Then there's the harsh warning, look out, the saints are coming through. And it ends with the somber telling of the title, and it's all over now, baby blue. I believe the reason for this format is to show a slightly confused headspace that is filled with grief that escalates between sadness and anger. As mentioned before, the lyrics tell of a final farewell, but it is never told who this farewell is given towards. There are numerous interpretations of the subject. One is that this farewell is meant to be towards his folk music audience. This can be supported by the fact that he performed this song at the end of the same Newport Folk Festival performance where he debuted his new electric sound. This would also be the last song before Dylan's next album, Highway 61 Revisited, where he confirmed that the electric sound was something that he would pursue. This song could also be a farewell to himself. It could be Dylan talking to himself and telling him what to do next. When viewing it this way, the final verse unlocks a whole new level of meaning. Leave your stepping stones behind now, something calls for you. Forget the dead you've left, they will not follow you. The vagabond who's rapping at your door is standing in the clothes that you once wore. Strike another match, go start anew. And it's all over now, baby blue. Now that the songs have been examined, it is imperative that we discuss the album cover. The album cover features Dylan and Sally Grossman, wife of his manager, Albert Grossman. The picture was shot with an edge-softened lens, which to me makes it look like the camera perspective is peeking through a keyhole into Dylan's house. With all the assorted items in the room, it's also like we, the audience, are peeking into his mind. I believe it is also pertinent to say that this idea of looking through a keyhole is mentioned in the lyrics to She Belongs to Me. In the shot, we can see various album covers, including The Impressions' Keep On Pushing, Robert Johnson's King of the Delta Blues Singers, India's Master Musician by Ravi Shankar, Lottie Lenya Sings Berlin Theater Songs by Kurt Weill, performed by Lottie Lenya, The Folk Blues of Eric von Schmidt, The Best of Lord Buckley, and finally, Dylan's own Another Side of Bob Dylan. I believe the purpose of these album covers being seen in the picture is to show the variety of inspirations Dylan has, and that have been used to make the album. The albums named contain folk, blues, R&B, and other genres that are represented in Bringing It All Back Home. Also, I've cited Robert Johnson's influence earlier. Lord Buckley can also be directly connected with the phrase "in the jingle jangle morning" from Mr. Tambourine Man being originally from a Lord Buckley recording. There are other objects, such as a Time magazine issue with 36th U.S. President Lyndon Johnson as Man of the Year, a harmonica on a table as well, and a Fallout shelter sign. The other objects in the shot, even if not directly connected to the music, certainly fit the overall visual language of the picture. Overall, I believe the album cover is a visual peek into the sophisticated and surreal mind of Bob Dylan, which perfectly suits the music of the album. I believe it to be fitting to end this video essay by talking about the last unexplained piece of this album, the name. The phrase "bringing it all back home" seems to imply that whatever it is not home. Perhaps the title is reflecting the time it was made, where for the previous year of 1964, the British invasion had taken over the music charts and radio. With the dawn of this album, the invasion would be overtaken by American artists once again. So, when pertaining to music, the album certainly brought it back home to America. But I believe there is another implication from the title. Perhaps it pertains to the music of the modern day, and Dylan is bringing it back home to its roots. As we've seen throughout the album, both the music and literary influences of the album go back for hundreds, in one case thousands of years. The music draws upon the influence of styles that are deeply rooted in American culture, like American folk and blues. The lyrics are drawn from a wide variety of sources, both in the modern day, like Kerouac, but also of old age, like the poetry of William Blake or even the Book of Revelation. So the album fulfills the meaning of the title, by bringing modern music back home to its roots, and, a bit paradoxically, shows a new type of music and a new type of songwriting that would heavily influence music going forward. The album is a work that is simultaneously before its time, of its time, and ahead of its time.